The text came in at 9:43 on a Tuesday night while I was washing a single plate in my kitchen sink. Unknown number. 8 words. Your wife is at the Marriott, room 312. I read it 3 times. Then I dried my hands on the dish towel, picked up my phone, and called my mother-in-law. Not Renata, not her friends, not the hotel, her mother. Margaret answered on the second ring, sounding like a woman already in her pajamas watching her evening shows. I told her I needed her to listen carefully and not say anything until I finished. Then I read her the text out loud. The silence that followed lasted 11 seconds. I counted. Then Margaret said 4 words I will never forget for the rest of my life. I'll meet you there. She was 61 years old, had a bad hip, and lived 20 minutes from that Marriott. She beat me by 3 minutes. My name is Grant Holloway, 39 years old. I manage inventory logistics for a regional hardware chain, which means I spend my days making sure the right bolts are in the right bins and nothing runs short when it shouldn't. It is not a glamorous job. It is a precise one. Precision suited me. I'd built my whole life around it. The right house in the right neighborhood, bought at the right time. The right savings rate. The right marriage, I thought. 7 years to a woman named Renata, who smiled like she meant it and always remembered the names of people she'd only met once, which is a rare quality and the kind of thing that makes a man feel proud standing next to her at parties. We were, on paper, completely solid. Renata worked in pharmaceutical sales, good territory, strong numbers, company car, a schedule that had her on the road 2 or 3 days a week visiting doctors' offices and hospital networks across a 3-state region. I was proud of her for it. She'd built that career from a cold call entry position into something real, and I'd watched her do it and felt nothing but admiration. When you love someone, their wins feel like your wins. That's the whole deal. I believed in that deal. The overnight trips were part of the territory. Literally. She'd be in Charlotte one night, Raleigh the next, sometimes down into South Carolina. She called every evening when she was on the road. We had a routine. She'd call around 8. We'd talk for 20 minutes about nothing important, what I ate, how the commute was, whether the neighbor's dog was still getting into our trash, and then she'd say she had an early start and we'd hang up, and that was the whole shape of the night. It was enough. Enough felt like plenty when you believed in the structure around it. I started believing less about 14 months before that Tuesday night text. It began with an energy shift I didn't have words for at the time. She was present but slightly further away than her body suggested, like someone who'd moved the furniture a ½ inch in every room. Nothing wrong exactly, just subtly not where it should be. Her phone started traveling with her in a way it hadn't before, into the bathroom, out to the car, face down on surfaces where it used to sit face up. She laughed at things on her screen that she didn't share. Small stuff, the kind of small stuff that a reasonable man talks himself out of noticing because he doesn't want to be unreasonable. I was a very reasonable man. I reasoned myself through 14 months of signals I should have read straight. Then the text came. Here's the thing about receiving a message like that. Your body processes it before your brain gives it permission to land. My stomach dropped on the first read. By the third read, my hands were completely steady. That's shock doing its job, creating this strange calm that feels like composure, but is actually just your system buying time. I stood at my kitchen sink and made a decision in under 60 seconds. I did not call Renata. I did not call the hotel. I did not text the unknown number back. I called Margaret. I need to explain this because it is the part that people always ask about first. Margaret Voss was not the soft kind of mother-in-law. She was a retired high school principal from Greensboro, North Carolina, a woman who had spent 30 years running hallways full of teenagers and had developed a complete immunity to nonsense. She loved her daughter fiercely and without condition, but she loved truth more.
I'd known this about her since the second time I ever met her, when she'd looked me dead in the eye over her kitchen table and said, "I'm not interested in people who tell me what I want to hear, Grant. I'm interested in people who tell me what's true." I had been in love with Margaret Voss, platonically, from that exact moment. If there was anyone who could walk into a situation like this and hold it steady without letting it become a spectacle, it was her. She answered on the second ring. When I finished reading her the text, the 11 seconds of silence felt like a held breath inside a church. Then, "I'll meet you there." I grabbed my keys. The Marriott was 14 minutes from my house on a Tuesday night with light traffic. I drove the speed limit the entire way, which surprised me. Both hands on the wheel, radio off, just the sound of the engine and my own breathing. I kept waiting for the emotion to arrive, the anger, the heartbreak, some tidal wave of feeling that the movies suggest should accompany a moment like this. What I felt instead was a strange, awful clarity, the kind you get when a thing you've been half suspecting becomes fully real. It doesn't destroy you in that moment. It just confirms you weren't crazy, which is its own kind of grief.
Margaret was standing at the entrance to the lobby when I pulled in. Khaki pants, zip-up fleece, reading glasses pushed up on her head like she'd been mid-chapter when I called. She looked like a woman who had decided something on the drive over and wasn't going to be talked out of it. She hugged me once, quick and firm, then held me at arm's length and looked at my face the way she probably looked at students who'd been sent to her office. "You all right?" she asked. "Not particularly," I said. She nodded like that was the correct answer. "Good. Let's go." We walked into the lobby together. I want to be precise about what I was feeling in those steps because it matters to the rest of this. I was not walking in to catch my wife. I was not building toward a confrontation I'd replay for years. I was walking toward the truth, and Margaret was walking beside me as a witness, because I had learned enough about how these situations unravel to know that the person who has done something will always try to rewrite the story afterward, and the only thing that defeats a rewritten story is a witness who was present for the original one. I stopped at the front desk. The clerk was a young woman, early 20s, name tag said Jordan, expression that said she was not being paid enough for whatever this was becoming. "I need you to ring room 312, I said. "My wife is a guest." Jordan looked between me and Margaret. Margaret looked back at her with the expression of a woman who had survived worse Tuesdays than this one. Jordan picked up the desk phone. She dialed. It rang 4 times, then a pickup, and even from where I stood I could hear the particular kind of scramble that happens on the other end of a line when someone answers a call they weren't expecting from a direction they weren't watching. Renata's voice came through, unsteady. "Hello?" Jordan glanced up at me. "There's a gentleman in the lobby asking for you, ma'am, and a woman with him." The pause that followed lasted 3 full seconds. Tell him I'll be right down." I stepped back from the desk. Margaret stood beside me with her hands folded in front of her and her jaw set at an angle that I recognized as the face she made when she was keeping her composure at significant personal cost. I put my hand briefly on her arm. She patted it once and didn't say anything. We waited 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock above the elevator bank. When the elevator doors opened, Renata stepped out alone. She was dressed, but barely. Jeans, a shirt that wasn't tucked right, hair that had been pulled together in a hurry. She walked toward me, and her eyes were doing 3 things simultaneously, looking at me, looking at her mother, and looking for a version of this moment that she could manage. She didn't find one.
She stopped about 6 feet away. Her eyes landed on her mother, and something shifted in her face that I had never seen before. It wasn't guilt. Guilt I might have been prepared for. This was something closer to collapse, the specific expression of a person who has just understood that the story they plan to tell will not survive the audience standing in front of them. "Mom," she said. Her voice came out like a door with a broken hinge. Margaret looked at her daughter for a long moment, not with rage, not with tears, with the steady, clear-eyed look of a woman absorbing something she would have to carry for the rest of her life and choosing to carry it upright. "I'm going to let your husband talk," Margaret said quietly. "I'm going to stand right here, and then you're going to tell us the truth, all of it." Renata looked at me. I had not rehearsed anything on the drive over. I had not planned a speech or arranged my grievances into a list. I had one question. "How long?" I asked. She closed her eyes. "Grant, how long, Renata?" She opened her eyes. 8 months. 8 months. I did the calendar backwards in my head the way you can't stop yourself from doing. 8 months ago was February. February was our anniversary. We'd gone to that restaurant she loved, the Italian place downtown, and she'd reached across the table and taken my hand and said she was grateful for me. I had thought about that dinner for weeks afterward as evidence that we were good, that we were still, underneath everything, pointed at each other. 8 months. "Who is he?" I said. It wasn't really a question. Questions have an upward lilt. This was flat. She told me. A doctor she called on. Married, 2 kids, lived 40 minutes north of us. They met in a hospital corridor, which sounds like something from a television script, but was apparently just real life arriving without concern for originality. It had started as dinner after a long day, which is the sentence that begins so many of these stories. Dinner, then more dinners, then the Marriott, then a pattern of Marriotts and similar hotels across the same 3-state territory where she'd been building her career and apparently a second life. Margaret did not move the entire time Renata talked. She stood where she'd said she would stand, and she listened, and she let her daughter's words land in the lobby air without softening them or interrupting them or offering any of the cover that a different kind of mother might have provided. That restraint was the hardest thing I've ever watched a person do. I could see what it was costing her in the set of her shoulders and the absolute stillness of her hands. When Renata finished, the lobby was quiet, except for the hum of the hotel's central air and the distant sound of the elevator somewhere above us.
Margaret spoke first. She looked at her daughter with an expression I cannot fully describe, except to say that it contained both love and grief in equal measure, neither canceling the other out. "You're going to answer every question he has," Margaret said. "You're going to give him every truth he asks for, and you are not going to ask him to minimize this so that you can feel better about it." She paused. "Do you understand me?" Renata nodded. She was crying now, quietly, the kind of crying that doesn't ask for anything. Margaret looked at me then. "I'm going to be in the car," she said. "Take the time you need." She walked out through the lobby doors with her bad hip and her zip-up fleece and her 61 years, and she sat in her car in the Marriott parking lot for 45 minutes while I stood in the lobby of that hotel and asked my wife questions that deserved real answers. Margaret did not check her phone. I know because I could see her through the glass doors. She sat straight in the driver's seat, and she waited. I will not catalog what Renata told me in those 45 minutes. It is mine to carry and not yours to borrow. What I will tell you is that I asked for specifics only where specifics mattered for my own accounting, and I asked for honesty above everything else, and for the most part, I got it. She was beyond performing by then. Performing requires an audience that might still be persuaded. I was not persuadable, and she knew it, and so what I received was the stripped-down truth from a woman who had run out of road. I told her I needed her to get her things from the room, check out, and go to her mother's house, not ours, her mother's. She asked if we could talk more in the morning. I told her I needed a week before I would be ready for that conversation. She nodded, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and went back to the elevator. I watched the numbers above the doors count upward to 3 and stop. I walked outside. Margaret had the passenger door open before I reached her car. I sat down. She handed me a bottle of water from her cup holder that she'd clearly had there the whole time, and I understood then that she'd stopped somewhere on her drive over specifically to be prepared for the moment I would need it. I drank half the bottle. We sat in the parking lot in the dark. 8 months, I said. She said, I heard. We sat for another few minutes without talking. In the lobby behind us, the elevator doors would be opening. Renata would be gathering whatever a person gathers when the architecture of their secret life collapses on a Tuesday night. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, I said. You don't have to know tonight, Margaret said. I know. Grant, she turned in her seat to look at me directly. I am sorry, not for her choices. She'll have to carry those herself. I'm sorry that this happened to you in this house, in this marriage you built in good faith. She paused. You deserved better than this.
I thanked her. We sat a few minutes more. Then I drove home. The week that followed was the longest of my life measured in small units. I called in to work the first 2 days, which I had never done without a documented illness. My supervisor, a steady man named Phil who had been divorced twice and had the particular wisdom of someone who is rebuilt from rubble, told me to take what I needed and said nothing else. That was the right thing to say. I slept in my own bed. I fed myself real food. I walked the neighborhood in the mornings, because moving forward in a straight line, even a small one, does something useful to a mind that would otherwise loop. On day 3, I called an attorney. Her name was Claire Sutton, referral from a friend at work who had used her a year earlier. She was direct, and she did not waste my time with unnecessary sympathy. She explained the landscape clearly, what was mine, what was ours, what the process looked like from the beginning. I took notes in the small notebook I kept for work meetings, because the act of writing things down made them manageable instead of enormous. On day 4, the unknown number texted again. You went to the hotel? I sat with that for a moment. Someone had known where Renata was. Someone had told me. Someone was watching some part of this situation from a distance with enough information to have sent me that first text and enough investment in the outcome to follow up. I typed back one question. Who are you? The reply came 3 minutes later. His wife. I set the phone down, picked it up again, thought about the doctor 40 minutes north of us, the 2 kids, the wife who apparently knew or suspected or had confirmed enough to track where her husband was taking someone else on a Tuesday night and decide to redirect the information rather than sit alone with it. I typed, Are you okay? A long pause, then, Working on it. I wrote back, Same. I never learned her name. We exchanged 4 more messages over the following 2 weeks. Practical ones. Timelines, what she knew, what I knew, information that turned out to be useful when attorneys got involved. There was never any emotion in those messages beyond the implicit emotion of 2 people helping each other confirm what was true. She was precise, and I was grateful for the precision. At the end of the last message she sent, she wrote, I hope you come out the other side of this. I wrote back the same thing and meant it. The divorce took 7 months. The house was mine to keep or sell. I kept it because I had built the back deck myself and repainted the kitchen twice and knew where every circuit breaker was and what each creak in the hallway floor meant. And there was something in me that refused to let her choices take the house I understood that well. I bought out her portion and signed the papers and shook my attorney's hand in a conference room with bad lighting and drove home to a house that was now entirely mine to configure however made sense.
Margaret called me on the day the divorce was final. I had not expected to hear from her, and the call surprised me. She asked how I was. I told her honest. She said she hoped I would stay in her life in some capacity because she had come to think of me as something more than an in-law and wasn't ready to revise that just because her daughter had revised everything else. I told her she didn't have to worry about that. We have coffee the first Saturday of every month. She brings the good pastries. I'm telling you this story because men who receive messages like that one sit with them alone more often than they should. They read 8 words on a Tuesday night, and they start negotiating with themselves. Maybe it's a prank. Maybe the number's wrong. Maybe I misread it. Maybe if I don't look at it directly, it means something different than what it says. I did not negotiate. I picked up the phone, and I called the person who would hold the truth steady with me. And then I walked toward the thing I needed to see instead of away from it. Not to perform courage, not to punish anyone, because the only alternative was to keep living inside a version of my life that was not real, and I had spent too many years building too carefully to maintain a structure I now knew was standing on a false foundation. You cannot pour over a crack and call it solid. You can only break it out and start from ground that is actually there. So here is the question I'll leave you with. You get that text, 8 words, unknown number, your wife's name, and a room number in a hotel you know the location of. What do you do in the next 60 seconds? Because the answer is the whole thing. The 60 seconds after the truth arrives is where a man finds out who he is when nothing is comfortable anymore. Drop your answer below. Subscribe if you want to hear what getting the foundation right the second time actually looks like.